Friends, I come to you today with great news. In this baseball game that we call life, where you have an at-bat every day, death, of course, is the pitcher trying to strike you out. In this game of life that we call baseball, or this baseball game that we call life, you're batting 1,000%. I know that seems obvious, but I want to say it again. Death has not struck you out yet. Yeah, that's good news. Let me clarify, I don't mean you're a good hitter. I just mean you haven't struck out yet. Sometimes we have found ourselves with 2 strikes and panicked and hit a terrible ground ball and sprinted because our life depended on it and barely made it to first in time. Sometimes we woke up and we didn't even know what to do, so we just parked the bat on our shoulder, and thankfully death threw 4 bad pitches, and we got to walk. Sometimes we got hit by the pitch, and a fastball from death hurts. And for some of us, it feels like we've gotten hit by a pitch week after week. So I'm not saying that we're all great hitters, but I am saying you're not dead yet. And I know this because here you are. This month we're talking about renewal. We're talking about what we would choose to keep if we were intentional about renewing the contract, because so many of our things now are on auto renewal. When's the last time you negotiated your phone contract? It's just running its own program like a habit. So we're talking today about which of the habits that we are involved in do we choose, and which habits are choosing us. And I think about habits because I have a confession to make. When I was 9, I thought I was going to be the next second baseman for the Cubs. I was going to let Ryne Sandberg finish his all-star career, but then I was going to be the next second baseman. And the only hitch in that plan is that I'm a terrible batter. Like in Little League, batting 150, right? But what I lacked in coordination, I made up for in my study of Major League Baseball players. And the first thing I noticed about baseball players is that they have a lot of habits when they get up to bat. And if you've watched 5 minutes of baseball in your life, you'll know what I'm talking about. There's the guy that endlessly fastens and unfastens his batting gloves, like 10 times on each hand before he gets up. There's the guy that kicks his immaculate cleats of any sand that doesn't exist. There's the guy that does this with the bat. What is this for? Is this going to help you hit? And even at 9, I knew that these habits had nothing to do with actually hitting the ball. But I wondered, how could you have started such a silly routine in your otherwise good at-bat? And the best I could come up with was that one day when that major leaguer was 9 years old, they noticed that their gloves were loose, tightened them, creamed a home run, and then thought between the stimulus of tightening the gloves and the response of a home run, that's my secret. I'm going to do this forever. And it worked enough for them to become Major League Baseball players, but even at 9, I knew this habit is not helping you bat better. But habits are sticky. Habits are sticky. We create a neural loop between the stimulus and the response. And we do it over and over until it auto-renews. Baseball is maybe not relatable enough. Let's talk about dessert. Is there anyone else in the room besides me, please, it can't just be me, that finishes dinner and then has a dessert? Okay, it's not universal, but it's common. So if this is not you, imagine with me. Let's agree on 3 things about dessert before I go further. The first, I'm talking about a habit, not an addiction. Addiction is a different neurochemical situation. I'm talking about habits. Second, desserts are amoral. They're not good, they're not bad, they're just a thing that people do. So this is not a sermon on how you should quit ice cream, although that would be a fascinating way to decrease the membership in a church. And the third thing I want to say, I don't remember what that third part was, we'll get to it. So I'm trying to figure out when dessert, oh, I know what it was. You don't need a dessert. There's nothing in the macronutrients or the vitamins and minerals of a bowl of ice cream that wasn't accomplished in your dinner. We can all agree, cognitively, dessert is a bonus and not a requirement. You say that now. Ask me again at 7 p.m. So what I'm curious about, just like with these baseball players, is when did I become a dessert eater? I can't remember when the habit started. I've definitely been renewing the contract every day, but I don't remember when it started. So I imagine it happened when I was like 3. I'm picturing a little 3-year-old Steve that brought his plate up to the sink, finished dinner, and assumed the next thing was like pajamas. And I'm imagining that I turned around and there at the table was a tiny bowl of ice cream. And if you're a 3-year-old Steve, that's the greatest day of your life. My birthday's in March. Why am I getting ice cream in June? And I assume that I sat down and inhaled the ice cream, and that my brain lit up with dopamine, and my stomach went, oh, ice cream. We need to produce lactase and sucrase to break this down. And I probably went to bed king of the world, thinking, what a great one-off that was. And I'm imagining the next day, 3-year-old Steve put his plate by the sink and turned around and there was the bowl again. It's the greatest week of my life. I don't know when it continued, but I know that I have not missed a dessert since, give or take. It's a sticky habit, right? There is a stimulus, ice cream is delicious, and the response, I'm going to eat ice cream. It's a habit. And you don't think about how bad a habit it is until you have this day, which any dessert eater in the room will know. You go to the freezer, there's no ice cream. Well, you're an adult now and you've disagreed with me that you don't need dessert. It's not essential to your survival. So you just close the freezer and you go, that's fine, I can just go upstairs. But your brain's got this loop in its head going, my dopamine receptors are bored. And your stomach's already produced the lactase and the sucrase because it knows what comes next after the stimulus. And so you take a breath and you say, you know what? I'm just going to go check the candy area. And there's no candy because the kids ate it all that day. And it's fine. I'm a grown-up. I don't need candy. What am I, 5? But your brain and your stomach disagree with you. So now you're getting desperate. You go to the baking section to look for the chocolate chips. Oh, that's right. We made cookies last week. Now you're really desperate, you go to the tea and the coffee area to find some cocoa, but it's June, you don't have cocoa. You scramble to the fridge to try and find some Hershey's chocolate syrup. There's none of that because it went down with the ice cream. And now you're asking yourself, do I want to drive to the grocery store at 8:30 p.m. to get some ice cream? Am I the only person in the room that has this experience? Okay, you don't have to raise your hand. I just want to know I'm not alone in that, right? You, my friend, have Shenpa. Shenpa is a Tibetan Buddhist word, and it refers to your attachment to something impermanent, like ice cream or your own existence. But let's talk about ice cream. You are hooked on that stimulus response. The first time it happened, you didn't expect ice cream, and you loved the response. And the second time, and then pretty soon it became a simultaneous stimulus response. And the stimulus is, I think I'll have some ice cream. And the response is, here's some ice cream. And you're hooked on it, and you need it. You don't cognitively need it, but boy, it feels like you need it. And it doesn't have to be ice cream. That's the point I want to make here. It could be that first or second or third glass of wine at the end of the day. It could be parking yourself on the sofa and watching 1, 2, 5 episodes on Netflix. We all know what our phones are doing to us. Phones are designed by Shenpa experts. And I don't mean Buddhists. I mean people who are experts at getting you back to the phone. All the apps that you have to check and have to recheck. It's a hooking, as Pema Chodron calls it, a hooked feeling. Because the ice cream is leading you around the kitchen and over to the grocery store. The phone is leading you back to it. You're not renewing the contract. It's auto-renewing. And all of us, if I can make an assumption, have some Shenpa going on in our lives. Some habits that we don't remember starting, but we're definitely not eager to finish. Some urges that need satisfying. your phone, your TV, that glass of wine, that bowl of ice cream. And they are leading you around. And if this seems dark, don't worry, there's some good news, and it comes to us from Viktor Frankl. Between the stimulus and the response is a pause. A pause. And in that pause lies your power to choose the response. That's the sermon. Let me say it again. It's Frankl's sermon. In between the stimulus and the response lies a pause. And in that pause is your power to choose a response. So for decades, I finish dinner and the stimulus says, "Where's your dessert?" And the response is, "Dessert." Where's the dessert? Dessert. Ice cream, ice cream, ice cream, ice cream. Wait! Do I want ice cream? Am I not full? And the first answer comes from your belly. Yes, I want ice cream. I'm hungry. It's delicious. You idiot. Myself gets mad at me. Okay? And then you just sit with it for a little bit of a longer pause. Why do you want ice cream? That's a stupid question. Ice cream is inherently lovable. Of course I want ice cream. No, why, Steve, do you want ice cream right now? I had a terrible day at work. Work is incredibly overwhelming. Give me this one nice thing. And slowly, as you sit in the pause, you get to stand next to yourself. And there you are, sitting in your kitchen with your empty bowl, no ice cream in it. And you're looking at yourself. And you're saying, tell me about ice cream and work. Well, I've been slammed at work for months now. They added 3 more projects on top of my load. They took away a colleague. I haven't had vacation in 14 months. And you're just standing there observing in that pause with compassion and love for this poor you that thinks that sugar and milk is going to solve your work problem. That's a lot to ask out of ice cream. And you're looking with compassion and saying, I don't know that ice cream can do that for you, buddy. Let's talk about work some more. What could you do there? Well, I could probably talk to my supervisor and tell him that we got to postpone this one project. And I'm going to ask if we can get Dan on this other project because he knows what he's doing on that one. And I need to take some vacation days. I'm rolling over on them at this point, a whole year without them. I got to take some time off. Well, that might have something more to do with your overwhelm than ice cream. It's never as satisfying in the pause. The pause, if I can speak clearly, the pause sucks. The pause is awful. Ice cream is immediate. It's dopamine. Having that conversation with your boss is complicated. Probably won't go well. Well, Steve, I thought you were a team player, right? There's all these things that you have reasonable fears to not address, and the ice cream is a shortcut. Well, Steve, why do you want that second glass of wine? Because parenting is really hard. Is that wine going to help your parenting? No, but it numbs the overwhelm for a couple hours. And then what? Well, then I have a headache and the same kids. Well, what do you really want? I want therapy. Okay, now we're getting somewhere, right? The pause is awful. It's so vulnerable that we can't go into that pause by ourselves because it's too much. It's so awful. But if we can just sit in the pause long enough between the stimulus and the response, there's this beautiful fruit that grows. And in Sanskrit, it's called prajna. Prajna is a Buddhist term for insight. And you can't grow that fruit by jumping from stimulus to response. That fruit only grows in the space between. And it is a hard-won fruit. But when we have the support and the love of one another and the spiritual practices to just interrupt the stimulus for a second and to sit down beside yourself with some curiosity, prajna can emerge, and it allows for conscious renewal of the habits you want to renew, and the transformation that you were really looking for. And I use that word transformation very specifically because it shows up in our newly articulated values. 7 days ago exactly, the delegates of Unitarian Universalist congregations in America gathered in that magical place, Zoom. You're familiar with it. It's magical. And thousands of us gathered, and we do what we always do in a general assembly. We took a pause between the stimulus and the response. We hated it. We got very mad at one another. We reinserted compassion. Then we got mad at each other again. But we covenanted to come back to the conversation. And then on Sunday, 7 days ago, by an overwhelming majority, the delegates voted for a new articulation of our values. Spoiler alert, it's a lot like the values we articulated in the 80s, which is a lot like the values we articulated in the 60s. We don't radically change who we are, but we covenant to come together and articulate those values. Justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity, all orbiting love at the center. We have always been a transformation people. And I know this because we are not stuck in 325 when a group of bishops argued with each other then and barely passed through a majority, one kind of covenant. We've been coming back to the table and arguing and sitting in the pause and hating that pause, but supporting each other through it, and then finding something beautiful. And I know this because if we hadn't inserted those pauses, if we stayed where we were in 1810, then the only kind of Unitarian ministry you would find in America in 1810 was a white Christian man from Harvard, specifically from Harvard. But all those pauses allowed us to imagine something more. That transformation is messy work, it's vulnerable work, it's community work. I told you that you're batting 1,000% so far. That's part of the truth. The other part of the truth is that death always gets the strikeout. A perfect record of 15 billion and 0 at finding that third strike for every batter. And that's okay. As Liz shared so beautifully in the reflection, you don't know if you have 20 more at-bats or 20,000 more. And we seek this pranya wisdom, this transformation power, not to become perfect, not to hit a home run every day. That's its own kind of attachment. Do you get that? Perfectionism is an attachment to an impermanent moment that's both self-loathing and narcissistic. That's a different sermon. We come not for perfection, but for liberation. Liberation from these hooks that are pulling us in every direction. So I don't know when that third strike will be called for you or me. But until then, let us gather in community on Sundays, in book discussion groups, meditation groups, and theme circles, wherever you find your people who love you and support you and give you the courage in that scary pause. May you feel the liberation that every remaining bat is bliss. May it be so.
Amen.